Good evening. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for joining the Black Builders Network. We're absolutely delighted to have you guys here today. It's our first event for the year. So, I mean, I'm stoked, even though I may not look like it, but I'm very excited about doing this again in 2025. Right. So, it's my absolute pleasure to welcome you to join us on today's masterclass. Today we have with us a powerhouse. I like to call him a powerhouse. Onyeka Akumah. I first got to know about Onyeka sometime in 2017. Peace, Joyce, and myself used to operate this digital marketing agency at the time, Rene Digital Hub. And Farm Crowdy was one of the first companies that we sent out our pitch deck to. We're hoping that at the time we could um, work with them, partner with them for marketing. So Onyeka invited us to his office at the time, somewhere around Agungi, can't remember very well. So it was myself and Fisitimi who went for that meeting. And we had a very interesting conversation with Onyeka. And since then, I've been a very quiet fan, right? So yes, I'm very happy that we're doing this webinar, this masterclass with Onyeka today. For those of us who are not familiar with Onyeka he's not just the founder and CEO of Treepz. Treepz is one of Africa's leading corporate mobility startups, right? Serving over 5 million customers across, 6 different countries. Onyeka is a true serial entrepreneur who has consistently, transformed challenges into opportunity. From his early days, topping his class in software engineering to building groundbreaking ventures like Farm Crowdy, Rent Small, I think Quick Gist, right? All of those endeavors, right? So his journey has been nothing but inspiring, right? So yeah, Onyeka is with us today. He'll be taking us on, you know, negotiating and closing deals. All right. So I'm excited about this and I cannot wait to get all of the wisdom that he has to share with us today. So yes, without much ado, Onyeka, you can take the floor.
It's nice to meet you all. Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm so grateful. And it's good to meet many of you on the call. Some I know, some I'm just meeting for the first time. And I'm happy to share from my experience. Thanks again for the opportunity. And I'm hoping when we're done with some knowledge shared with the rest of the class. Looking forward to feedback. All right, so I was told to speak on the topic negotiating and closing deals. And just give some context about my background into why when Peace reached out to me and said this was the topic she wanted me to speak on, I said, okay, no problem. And I was going to be picking from my lessons and my experience to share with the Founders Connect community. Just some background, some of the deals that my experience in talking through what we'll be spending the next couple of minutes on will come from two areas. The first one is my merger and acquisition deals that I've done, that I led personally and I executed on my own, which included my first startup that I built, which was QuickGist in 2013. And after 8 months, sold it to Business Day newspaper. The second was the combination of exiting my second startup that I exited in 2020 for 10.5 million after 1 year. And then the next one was going into new markets and being in a position to acquire our competitors in those markets. And that happened in Ghana and Uganda at different times in 2021. And then also we repeated again that model in Kenya in 2023 as we expanded into that market. So I'll be speaking from that M&A perspective. From a funding perspective, I will speak about how I'll be speaking from my experience of launching a travel agency, the third largest now in Nigeria, and in 3 months raising $2 million for that. I was speaking about closing deals of over $80 million in debt for my startups. and then closing deals of over $12 million in equity for my startups. But I think one of the most exciting things I like to say about raising money while I was going through some accelerator programs, one of them being Techstars, was spending 15 minutes with an investor for the first time meeting him ever, spending 15 minutes with him, and then raising $100,000 within 5 minutes after that call. I'll talk about how those kind of things happen in you're having conversations with investors and people, and you want to achieve those kind of results. So I will be speaking from this perspective. And as I do so, first is the art of the way I look at negotiating. The term negotiating encompasses several related meaning, but at its core, it involves discussions aimed at reaching an agreement. The general definition is that it's a process of discussing something with another individual or group to reach an agreement. It's simple. And it can happen in different places. It can happen in several ways. It can happen in business and it can happen in your personal life. In business, you're having to do several contract negotiations. This includes negotiating terms of agreements, supply agreements, vendor agreements. It involves discussing pricing, delivery schedules, and all. When it comes to sales transactions in business, buyer and seller negotiation price. Commonly, you see it with maybe real estate. You're buying a house or you're buying a car. You're negotiating. The common term is when it's used in merger and acquisitions for complex negotiations, which occur between companies that are trying to merge or acquire themselves or sell their company. Negotiations that involve valuation, ownership, structure, legal agreements. And then even when you're getting a job, you're negotiating with your job seekers around your salaries, benefits you get, the working condition. Existing employees also negotiate how they get a pay raise or promotions. And then another common one is with fundraising in business, where it comes to startup life of negotiating term sheets and raising capital. Even in our personal lives, purchasing goods and services is we also negotiate with buying a car, a house, family and household matters. You're negotiating chores, who does what in the house. We start negotiating, in fact, in places like Nigeria, you start negotiating as as soon as you start talking. You start negotiating with your parents, you're negotiating with your siblings, you're negotiating with your neighborhood. If you're one that played football as a child, you negotiate who is the goalkeeper, who's going to be in the post, who well, the guy that brings the ball to the pitch is not usually the one you want to negotiate with. So in that regard, you then go into conflict resolution. You're negotiating disputes on the pitch, you're negotiating disputes with friends, relationship dynamics. Even you're negotiating with your lady that you want to take out, or you're negotiating where you should go to and why you shouldn't spend money the way you want to spend money. We are constantly negotiating. And so it becomes an important tool, not just for business, but also in our personal lives. And we want to do well with it and learn the art of it. So, but there are two areas that I will focus on in the core of my conversation. One is business negotiations, and the second is negotiating towards fundraising, because the core of what I understand the team here is sitting on is all around founders looking to either do business better in their negotiations with people or negotiating for fundraising. So I'll start first with the business angle. Negotiating deals is a fundamental skill for business, and there are five key things to keep in mind when doing that. And I speak to this basically from my experience. Preparation is paramount. You need to know your objectives, clearly define what you want to achieve from the negotiation. What are your must-haves and what are you willing to compromise on? Going into, okay, because I'll speak on fundraising, I would save most of the examples on fundraising for that particular topic. But when you're going into a negotiation, the best negotiators understand what they will be willing to compromise on. And they do a lot of research on the other party that they are going into the hall with. Even I've seen negotiators that prepare the room. They understand that this human being they're having conversations with loves when the light is low, loves when his chair is higher than the others. People do this much in their research around how they are negotiating with people. You see a person prepare so hard. He wants to. I go into negotiations, right? Sometimes I go into negotiations and I want to know. I research as much as if it's a guy, is he into sports? What kind of sports? If he's into football, what team does he support? If he's an Arsenal fan, even if I'm a Manchester United fan, I'll wear an Arsenal jersey. I want to go in there and get something. I'll wear an Arsenal jersey if I have to. I will put something that I'll get the latest report on what whether Arsenal, if Arsenal lost a match or won a match or something interesting about the club, that I'll bring into the conversation to make it smoother, to make us connect beyond what I'm coming there for. I have done my research. I then determine my best alternative to a negotiated agreement, knowing what I will realistically call my expectations for what comes out of this deal and what I'm ready to move on from. Then I focus on number two, which is mutual benefits. I never go into negotiations because I want to win everything. I go into negotiations because I want to win some and allow the other guy win some. Yesterday, I was having a conversation with someone, and I asked the person, it was a test. I was going to pay for value for something, but I knew what the value was. And let me say for this example, I knew the value was maybe around 700. And I asked the person, and because the person wanted to sell, the person told me, for the sake of this example, the person told me $500. And I'm like, I said, no, you've negotiated badly. Um, you can actually, if you want to get $500, you could have told me 700 and I'll negotiate down with you to 500. Rather than you saying 500 and I start negotiating with you, I will get to a point where I want to get maybe for 4 or 350, and you know that's a bad deal already. I mean, it's as simple as it's this skill. It's something I think people get to see very often as you go to markets, in places, in many markets. I used to be one person that I will follow well, I didn't do it because I loved it. My mom used to force me to follow her to the market, and she wants to buy oranges. She will ask the man, the Hausa man, because we grew up in the north, and she'll ask him in Hausa. Before she ask him, she'll first say, "Oh, how's your wife?" She'll say it in Hausa. "Oh, my wife is fine." "Oh, how are the babies?" "They're fine." "Okay." "And was harvest good today?" "Yes." "Okay." "So how much is this item?" And he goes, "Oh, it's going for 200 naira." And my mom will say, "Oh no, I want to pay 150 naira." And the man will say, "No, I'll because of you, I'll give it to you at 180 naira." My mom will say, "Is that your last price? I mean, I'm your customer. I come here consistently." And I'm watching her negotiate and negotiate. And at the end of the day, maybe she'll pay 170. That man may have maybe lost maybe 10 naira, and my mom may have maybe gained 10 naira. At the end of the day, there's a win-win scenario that everybody's just happy to know that we did a deal. I didn't get it all, but I got something. She didn't get it all, but she got something. They identify shared interest. They identify value creation. In finding those mutual benefits, it makes the negotiation pie really, really good for everybody to be able to divide and get something. Communication is key. And in speaking around communication being a key factor, active listening is very important in the art of negotiation. You shouldn't necessarily be the loudest in the room because you're trying to force down someone's throat a particular price or a particular deal you're trying to sell. In many instances, especially when you've not even paid attention to doing your research around the culture of who you're talking to, you lose out. There was a deal that happened for me that I had to have conversations with someone in an East African country. I did not realize that in speaking like a Nigerian, it feels like we are speaking with force and we're talking and everywhere is shaking. But we're just talking. But this other guy on the other end felt like you were shouting. And so you've come into a negotiation and you're just talking and you're expressing yourself about the deal you're trying to give out. And the other guy is shaking because he feels like what he's hearing is a man shouting at him. And so one of those important, and obviously, if you don't get that right, that deal won't happen. One of those very important things in the art of communicating is in active listening to understand what are both the verbally and non-verbally things the individual you're talking to is communicating back to you. Clear and concise language. For some parts of Africa, we love big English. And many times people don't even know the meaning of the words. They just put the words in together because it makes them sound intelligent and smart. In negotiating, I found out that ambiguity is something you should avoid and ensure that your message is understood in the simplest terms so that you're not misunderstood in the process of communicating and the other individual is hearing something else. Then manage your emotions. In doing so, you've got to have a calm and professional demeanor in every situation, even when it's tensed. Hey, there are times you go into negotiation deals and the other party wants to trigger you. And it's all part of what they're doing to get you off the deal, maybe because they have somebody else that's giving them a greater offer. And so that ability to be able to control your emotions and manage it and give that calm and professional demeanor is absolutely important. The next thing is strategic concessions. Plan your concessions. Don't give away concessions without getting something in return. I mean, you have to move a bit fast. Value concessions differently. What may be a small concession for you may be a large one for the other party. And then trade, don't just give. Trade. Don't just give. Ensure that every concession you make is met with a reciprocal concession from the other side. Build and maintain relationships. This has been a major tool for me in my negotiations. I want to go into a new market and I want to have conversations about acquiring a business in a new market. Many times I start that conversation from building relationship with the potential business I want to acquire, sometimes 2 years before I even make my move. I would have created value for them. They would have seen value from me. We would have understood ourselves. I would have seen why this is a good deal to have. My stakeholders may already know 18 months before I eventually make a move, before even the founder on the other end knows that I'm actually coming for their business. But because we've built such a wonderful rapport, it makes it easier. Even the negotiation, the price, and all of that becomes a lot more better because they see what value you're giving over time. And then you maintain professionalism in your negotiation process and a long-term view. 10 things that founders should note when closing funding deals. 10 things you should note. And I'm going to speak, like I said, from my own experience of raising equity or debt for my startups. 10 things founders should note. The first one, understand your valuation. It will shock you how I've invested in 16 startups and 17 startups. And it will shock you. And also, I've been involved in just seeing fundraising deals happen or introduce founders to investors. It will shock you how founders will come and say, oh, I want to raise $100,000. And then you're being asked, okay, you want to raise $100,000. What's your valuation? Oh, my valuation is $500,000. Okay, how did you arrive at $500,000 to give out 20% of your company? Or it's $1 million. How did you arrive at that? And they start talking about emotional things like, oh, so with my experience and the things I've done in the past, and where we think we're going to with the business, we believe that our valuation is X or Y. How do you believe it's X or Y? You've got to do thorough research and understand your company's valuation from a place where you justify every data, projections, and market analysis that can support the valuation you say you command. Knowing your worth is the number one thing founders should. If you watch the Lions Den or Dragons Den, and many of these shows that focus on how investors sit in a room and they're having conversations with founders that come in that want to get expertise, get them to fund their business. You still see how these people are negotiating terms and negotiating valuations. Many times the founders have done a lot of research on how to determine their valuation with all of these things I mentioned, data, projections, and market analysis to get a very strong foundation of why their valuation should be a certain amount. The second thing, master the term sheet. Now, in this regard, I have gone into meetings where I've had conversations with investors. They've done due diligence on my business. And at the end of the day, they send me a term sheet. I look at the term sheet, I sign. And in signing that term sheet, I gave out 15% of my business to this particular investor because based on the term sheet, they were going to help me raise $250,000 for me, based on what I saw on the term sheet. I then get into a place where I have new investors that have come on board, and those new investors say, okay, we want to invest in you. So this investor that came previously, where's the term sheet? I said, oh, this is it. They're like, why did you give them 15%? I said, because they were going to raise 250K. Did they raise the 250K? And I was like, no, not yet. They are in the process. He said, but they are not going to raise the 250K. I'm like, no, but the term sheet says that. These new lawyers then say, no, Onyeka, you have a major error in your term sheet. You need to go back to these guys and tell them, if they don't give you the 250K, they should cancel this term sheet. I go to my European, they're actually Europeans, European investor, and I say, based on this term sheet, you guys haven't invested the 250K. I think we may have to reconsider this whole arrangement. They're like, no, Onyeka, sorry, unfortunately, we've signed and we're moving on. I'm like, uh, from where to how? Which kind of magic is that? You didn't give me the 250K. I signed a term sheet with you. You've not given me the money. I cannot move on the basis of you not giving me money. They say, Onyeka, we are not going to fall back. I then took it to the lawyers, the new lawyers, and said, they say they're not fall back. They say, yes, we know they won't. I said, why? They say, because the way they crafted the term sheet, they wrote that we will provide your startup with business development activities. And for this, we'll be getting 15% of your company with additional capital of 250,000 over a period of XYZ. Before the with, I thought I saw a comma. I didn't know that there was a full stop. Even if the next word started with a small letter, with, because it was a small letter, what it meant was that for me, I read the statement as one. They will do business development, they will have 15%, and they will give me 250K. But what that statement meant was they will do business development for whatever definition they call that. And when they defined it, they said it was just getting on the plane, coming to see me for an hour and going back. That is business development. And they were going to get 15% of the company, and there was a full stop. Statement had ended. The part of with 250,000 wasn't part of the deal. I lost 15% of my company. You can imagine me now seeing new term sheets, the kind of eyes I used to look at them. I see many, many, many founders not paying attention to this very fundamental document that can make them keep their business longer or lose their business entirely. Pay attention to it and don't hesitate to seek legal counsel if you need to clarify all the ambiguities, every one of them. After that, I've met several other shark investors that I just say, oh, thank you, I'm not doing. I see founders take the money, then they get stuck. When I'm like, I'm not doing, thank you. The third thing, leverage competition. If you have multiple investors, use that to your advantage. Create FOMO, create a sense of urgency. So when I'm sending messages to my investors, for instance, in building relationship with them, which is the next thing, I'm always sending them stakeholders updates about what we're doing. But I have different levels of stakeholders update. There's one that's in-depth that goes to my real stakeholders, and there's one that I use to build interest about what's going on in the company, which feels like a news report. And so as I'm sharing with them, I then tell them, hey, our funding round is moving on nice. I have XYZ. I may not put the names of the investors. I have XYZ number of investors that have already committed. Our round has reached 10%, genuinely. I come back to you a week later or 2 weeks later. I say our round has reached 40%. The person knows we are moving. And it's not just that it's reaching 40%, we're growing. This is what is happening in the business. In the first week, we did $100,000 in GMV. By the second week, I'm coming back to you, we've done 300,000 with 200 customers. By the fourth week, and then you're creating that sense of urgency that, see, the business is growing and investors are jumping on board. A dual track process can be useful by exploring funding and merger and acquisitions at the same time. Don't also look at it purely from an investment perspective. Also look at it from a place where you may find interest in someone that wants to acquire you. I had a similar scenario. where a particular investor, so I raised a round of funding at $7 million. That was my post-money valuation. And just when I closed that round of funding, I raised $1 million at $7 million. Just when I closed that round of funding, somebody wanted to acquire the startup. We started the conversations around acquiring the startup. I was in a fundraising round. I just announced it. And a month later, somebody wanted to acquire us. And then I did not lock it down. I did not ignore it. I started the conversation with that particular entity. And the conversations moved on to the point where I got them to commit a particular value. They value the business. They valued us 2x, 2x and more, about 15 million. And this was a month after I had just closed at 7. I then went back to some of those investors that did not want to come on the round. I said, hey guys, well, I know you didn't want to come on the round, but we've closed that round. We closed at 7. We just got somebody offering to actually acquire us at 2x. If you still want to get involved in our business, I'll give you a discount. Maybe it won't be at 15. I can give you at 12 million. Come into my round of funding now, just before this guy does a deal, and maybe you get something at the end of the day. I closed the next round in less than a month. That is how you use two different circles. One was supposed to be purely a fundraising circle, but luckily for us, we then had an M&A deal happening on the side, and we used that. And I even carried the CFO of the company that wanted to acquire us. I was getting into investor meeting. I said, oh, okay, if you don't believe me, see the CFO here. Talk to him. The CFO of the other company that wants to acquire us, talk to him. I used that to close another funding round in less than a month. Build investor relationship. Investors are not robots. They are human beings who have feelings, who have hands, legs, and eyes like us. You can have conversations with them. You can build relationships with them. And building relationships shouldn't just purely come from a place where you're giving the person the mindset that I'm only here because I want your money, but genuinely find ways to create value for them. Fundraising is about more than just money. It's about building long-term relationships. Sometimes they may not yield into you raising funding now, but it can lead to you raising funding from them in the future, maybe when you meet their thesis, or it can lead to them even introducing you to new investors in your network. Know your leverage. Identify your strengths and use them to your advantage. This could be a strong traction. Pretty much you tell, for instance, your strength, especially as an individual, comes from a place of you have a talented team that is strong with technology and strong with marketing. And you focus on that and you leverage that and use it to sell the value your business has. Yes, maybe you're not strong on the operational side. That is why you're raising funding to fill up that gap and run with it. Understand what makes you unique. Why is this team super? Some businesses merge with some businesses because this business is strong with marketing. These ones are strong with technology. These ones know the terrain, and together they come together to build something and create deals and make business happen. Be prepared to negotiate. Be prepared to negotiate. That means it goes back to the whole thing about doing your research, ensuring that you understand what you're ready to walk out of the table with, know where your compromises are going to sit, understand your win-win scenario, prepare yourself for the process. The fundraising process, usually when you find 2, 3 founders running a company and they're going through a fundraising process, in my experience, it takes sometimes 80% of my time. And so I need to prepare my team members to be in a position to take on the baton from me in actually running other parts of the business that I would have hands off from so that they can get value to the company, continue growing while I'm focused on fundraising. Due diligence is a two-way streak. Due diligence is not just done from the founder's perspective, but you as the founder need to also do your due diligence on who you're talking to. What is the reputation of this particular investor? Who have they invested in? Can you speak to the founders of the companies they've invested in without them introducing you to them? Have you gone on Crunchbase to see when did their fund stand? Is it a 7-year fund? Is it a 15-year fund? Which is usually rare, especially essentially maybe with grants. But is it a 7-year fund? What stage is their investment fund in? Are they in the beginning stage? Did they just start deploying capital? Or are they at the latter stage where they want to start recouping their investment and you're coming to tell them to come and give you money? In due diligence is a two-way street where you pay attention to what, where, and how this investor is today as it relates to your business. I give you an example. I had a reason to pitch to 80 investors at some point in building one of my businesses. And in speaking to those 80 investors, more than 60 of them said no. Their no is either they don't respond to you, or they don't come back to you, or they respond to you and say no. The remaining 15 of them that got into the conversations, eventually I was able to get 11 of them to eventually invest. But I had to pitch consistent. Imagine pitching 30 minutes to an hour to 80 investors. That was painful. And that's what I see many people do, which is not the right way. The next time I then found myself raising money, I focused on researching. I spent more time researching and doing my due diligence on the investor to the point where I understood this is the right person to speak to at this time. And then in speaking to them, I spoke to 12 investors and I was able to get 9 of them to say they wanted to go ahead. As against spending time speaking to 80 and then spending so much energy doing that. Maintain momentum. One of the ways to do this during the fundraising process is sending regular stakeholders updates, showing you dealing with the challenge. And stakeholders updates, mind you, they are not supposed to always tell that the business is always good. Be sincere where you have challenges, but find ways of crafting your narrative when you're talking about those challenges to find how the investors or the stakeholders or whoever is reading can help you in dealing with those challenges. If you lost someone in the team to another company, find ways of saying why and find ways of showing them why you're going to create a better defense in the future and where you may need help. And it will shock you how many of them will be willing to help you. There's some investors that are on my stakeholders updates that I send regularly that have not invested in my company in 3 years. But the network they've opened for me or the business they've given me to continue to do more in my company has been more than some other investors that have invested a lot of dollars in the company. Now, just finding ways of showing that momentum and showing the traction, the deal, showing how the deals are going, how the curve is going with your startup, it makes people glued to you and want to be part of what you're doing. Legal documentation is crucial. I've talked about this earlier. And then focus on long-term alignment. At the end of the day, in whatever deals you're doing, whether it's founder deals or investor deals, it's about joining forces with somebody else to make whatever it is your vision bigger. So make sure you've done all of these things and you now have found someone that you have a long-term alignment with, found someone that can give you greater value in your company, whether it's as an investor or as an operator or as a company you've merged with or acquired to grow your business at the end of the day. Because after all is said and done, what you're building is a business to create value for people. And that should never leave you as the focus for why you're going through all of this process. All right. So that is pretty much me within the time frame that I had. And I'll hand this over back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Onyeka. This has been a very, very insightful session. I believe that we all have been listening very attentively, and some of us have questions. So we want to like very quickly with the next 10 minutes take some questions. So if you have questions, please identify by raising up your hand. I can see one hand up. Let me just confirm. Kizito, I can see Kizito's hand up. So Kizito, please ask a question very quickly.
Hi, Onyeka. Yeah, this is Kizito, currently in Ontario. And I have sort of like observed your trajectory from afar, and I've seen that, you've had sort of like the track record. In terms of your investor relations approach, do you think it's the goodwill you get from investors? I mean, still having people who are, not investing in your projects, but giving them updates. Does that come from the track record you've shown over the years? or is it a function of, you know, the problems you're trying to solve and the industries that you know, you are involved with?
Yeah, good question. It's both. In the early days, in my early days of building businesses, um, so people didn't know much about me and what I had done in the past. Prior to me launching my first business or my second business actually in 2016, they didn't have an idea that I was pretty much the first employee in Sabunta, which merged with Kasua to become Jumia. And I was the only director that set up that. They didn't know I was employee number 9 in Wakana in 2010. They didn't know I helped to launch Travel Better until later on. If you Google online for the founder of Travel Better, you see my name. I'm not the founder, but because I helped to launch it, so people don't know all that. But why I had to start with that is prior to me even going live with my first startup, I had built relationships with several people before that. I had worked for 10 years for other companies, British Council, GT Bank, Deloitte, and then these startups that I mentioned. And so I had built a network of people that I always refer to as people that gave me relationship capital, that helped me to take off with my businesses, that helped me to get any customers with my businesses. And so by the time I then started with whatever it is I created or whatever it is I learned, whether it was Farm Currency or Rent Small Small or Treepz, those were the relationships I leveraged on to kick off. And it gave us momentum in the first 3 months to 6 months to get some traction that I could then use to create the right narrative for potential investors outside of my domain. Most of my investors are outside of my domain. They're outside my domain being they're not necessarily Nigerian-based investors. So there's how much even what I've done with those companies could help me with. I will then create narratives that I'm pitching to an investor in the US or to an investor in Canada or in Europe, and then find the right words that I can use to show consistency in our growth or challenges that we're dealing with on a weekly to monthly to quarterly basis to create a rapport with them. I then had investors that will say to me, when I miss a stakeholders update, oh, what happened? I'm like, oh, wow, were you paying attention? Like, yeah, I had an investor that said, I enjoy your update. I know I haven't invested, but I enjoy reading your updates. And I'm like, okay, fair enough. And he was based out of Canada. I hadn't met him ever, but he came on my captive because so he came on the stakeholders because somebody told him to be part of that, to pay attention to what we're building. So this is how I've managed that narrative over time. There is where the value of relationship capital comes and cuts in for over 10 years, but there's also where consistent narrative and creating rapport with the people reading and showing them that you can be trusted with that level of consistency helped over time.
So Samoye and Kenny, then Tito, your questions very quickly. 1 minute.
All right,
Each.
thanks so much. Thanks, Onyeka, for that insightful session. Really, really valuable. I'm a first-time founder. I'm presently just building my startup. I would just love to hear and learn about what exactly to pay attention to when trying to position your startup for investors. Right now, our focus is not on investors. Like I said, we're just trying to build, right? But what are the things that we need to put in place that helped you over the years? Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, hi, my name is Kendi. Thank you, Onyeka, for your time and for your wisdom. I'm also a first-time founder, but like you, I have also worked 12 years in tech across different industries. My question is, does having a CTO matter for a first-time founder, even though you have gained traction and you are still pre-revenue? Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Oyeka, for the insightful session. I'm also a first-time founder. I think it's first-time founders asking question. So I have a question as regards valuation. If you have some tips and wisdom on how you can properly value your business or your company, and then how you can effectively position for investors. And so that's the question that I want to ask. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. And Congratulations to all the first-time founders. You're all champions. Your people building right there. While people make noise, you are building and creating value. If you focus on it, you would make all the mistakes, learn from them, and build better, whether it's with what you're building now or what you build later in the future. So seriously, well done. Now, just to speak to the question. So the first question on positioning for future investment, that is a very good question. And the best way to go about it is storytelling from the founders. And how I describe storytelling, whether it's in your stakeholders updates that you're sending regularly, or using LinkedIn effectively, or using Twitter. Storytelling helps you. Great storytellers are able to attract solid co-founders to join them on a journey. They're able to sell to early customers to experience their software, and they're able to position for maybe even the media to write about them and call them authorities in a space even before they get their first investor. And right down to getting the investor, great storytellers are able to attract those investors into investing in their business. I know many founders that just because they have found very good ways of going on LinkedIn or Twitter or on Medium to write about the challenges of what they're experiencing and how they have created solutions for them, makes them endeared to many people who engage with them from these different levels. And sometimes they can start telling the story from the problem phase, even before a product has been named. They talk about the problem phase. They're using it to get surveys, get insights. They move from there into, okay, you know what? I'm actually building something to solve this problem. And you know what? I've actually named it. And you know what? We've registered our company. And maybe there are 2-3 people that may find value in this. And I'm able to show that, oh, you know what? 3 people joined me on this journey from a pro rata, pro bono, whatever it is, relationship to help craft this out. And guess what? We had our first customer and we did our first 1 million naira. Guess what? We've done our next 10 million. Guess what? I lost my co-founder to another company, but I found better ways of doing it. I was able to get an advisor on my team. You haven't talked about fundraising, but you've made people excited about the way you've positioned to tell a story that attracts them to the problem you are so passionate about creating a solution for. And that positions you in front of, and then mind you, you can have the most beautiful product out there. If you don't know how to connect with the right people to see it, it's useless. So while you're a great storyteller, make sure you're having the right audience see what you're saying. Whether it is that you tag the investors or you go to their comments and you comment with sense about what they are saying, you find a way of selling what you're selling without making sure that you look like you're all over the place. You find a way of being an authority, and you only engage in, for instance, when I was purely focused on transportation, you will only see me talk about transportation or repost about anything related to transportation or anything focused on entrepreneurship. If you do not have business in transportation, I will like what you're posting, but I'm not going to post it on my handle. If it's not related to my own sector, because I want people to see me as a voice in a sector. And that builds the respect with your potential investors, that by the time you're now telling them, hey, you know what, I'm actually looking at fundraising. It's not a time, it's something I want to do maybe in the next 3 months. You already have fan base, an army, good people, ambassadors supporting you and making you an attractive proposition for the future. So that is how I would position even before I start looking for investment. Having a CTO, does it matter? The answer to the question lies in what are you building? If I am building, I have a tech background. I had a first class in software engineering from an Indian university. But every time I want to build a new company, I will never be the CTO. Because even if I had a distinction in that, I didn't really enjoy it. I enjoyed more of the marketing of the software than the building of the software. But the advantage for me is when my tech team want to do the buhaha and start to boost me, I'm like, calm down, Oga. I know what you're saying. I'm not one of those you will scatter my head with words. If you're tired, I will go in and code myself. So it helps. But where I'm going to with it is, you asked, is it necessary having a CTO? If I am building a software or I'm building a company that the essential product is driven by technology, my number one co-founder is a CTO. If the product is focused maybe on fintech, I will look for somebody that's strong with product design that is focused on fintech. It depends on what you're building. And you don't always need the most experienced people as co-founders. If you can't get them and convince them, perfect. What you need is someone as passionate as you and as humble as you are to learn and grow and build themselves on what you're creating in the early phase. Because sometimes those very experienced people that you call CTOs, and by the way, maybe I just put this out there, I don't recruit people into my team. Even if you're a co-founder, I'll never call you CTO, COO, CMO. I don't call people chiefs. You're all VPs, highest head of departments. Prove yourself on the job over a 6 months, 12 months, 18 months period, then we'll promote you. Because once a person is a CTO, if that person doesn't perform, the only option you have for him is to fire him. But if he's the head of technology and he's not performing, then you try, he's not performing. One way to escape it is call him SVP and go and look for a proper CTO when you have money. But so anyway, back to it. If it's essential, if the person is essential, I bring them in. If you need a CTO and it's essential, bring them in, negotiate deals with them, equity and future earnings with them for them to come on board. The last one on valuation, how do you arrive at the right valuation? I use, in the early phase, I use comparison valuation analysis. I take potentially what my competitors in a similar market have been valued at when they first started. I look for that and I use it to craft my valuation. That's one. Number two, I look at before I go to, so this is my own mode, before I go to investors to ask them about investing in my startup, I first want to be able to get my own money or use my own relationship capital to launch the startup first so that I can get some traction. And then I use that traction to then command a better valuation. Because maybe without that traction, it would be valued at $1 million. But if I'm able to show that, we were able to get some people to pay and we got $20,000 in the first month, I can then start using the multiples of that and say, we would have been $1 million pre-launch, but post-launch, we actually have a customer base of 20 people and a waiting list of 100. If these 100 people pay the same way the 20 people are paying, I will be at this $2 million valuation. So I use that as well. So comparative analysis and sometimes finding ways to kickstart the business with my own money so I can get better valuation from the conversation with investors is the second. The third way is getting into accelerator programs. An accelerator like Techstars, immediately you get into Techstars, even if you were zero valuation, immediately you get in. If they're investing $120,000 to take 7% of your company, it values you already at 1.8. So accelerators can be some level of validation to help your valuation move to at least the standard of what accelerator should be investing with you on. And when you're done with your demo day, some accelerators will say you can only raise at a minimum of $4 million or $5 million valuation because you've gone through our program. So sometimes validation can come from accelerator programs helping because they've invested at a value to get shares to bring you through the program. And that can help you grow from that particular level of valuation. I hope I did answer the questions with that. But thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Onyeka. It has been amazing. I've been noting things and I'm like, yes, I'm very happy that this happened. I mean, the conversation is timely. And like I said earlier, lots and lots of wisdom from this session. So thanks a lot, Onyeka. Thanks for doing this with us. Thanks for speaking to our community. And all the best, Onyeka.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'd love to connect with everyone on LinkedIn. If there are more questions I couldn't answer, you can shoot me a message on LinkedIn. It's just Onyeka Akumah on LinkedIn, and I'd love to connect with you.
Yes.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank this as well. She came to my community and spoke, and she did an amazing job.
Thanks everyone for showing up. I hope you had a good time. I hope you learned a lot like I did. And I hope that for us, the first time founders, all right, this session was like for you guys, I think. you guys are able to take all that you've learned today. All of us are able to take the things that we've learned today and, put it into action and do great work out there. All right. So thanks everyone for showing up. I appreciate it. I really, really appreciate it. And yes, until next time, have a wonderful evening.